Yeah, but I think first of all, if possible, you don't want to be volunteering on the board in your same district. It's going to cause a lot of problems, but practically we know that's, especially the smaller districts, like George was referring to, you can't get away from that. People are going to have to do it. One big issue is if you're going to be volunteering, or especially if you're going to be paid there for doing any of this kind of work, you've got to make sure that the executive director, chief, whatever it is the boss when you're volunteering. You're not telling him how to run anything. He's got to be in charge.
Well,
oh yeah,
I guess you glasses. There, he knows that about.
Yeah, thanks, doctor. If you're actually, you could be the best plumber or the best ditch digger in the county, but if you're going to be doing something that entails compensation or even reimbursement, you really better examine and make sure everything's ethical and handled transparently, because it's a big issue. All right.
We want to add? What's the key elements of this, folks? What are the key elements? You help us.
Transparency.
Absolutely, good point. Being transparent. You are, what was that?
Cooperation.
Cooperation. You're doing a task that your board asks you to do, and you serve on the board, but it's something that needs to be done, and you're a good skill to doing it, do it. Okay? Sir?
I'm going to complicate this even further.
All right.
What if all three board members are the same ditch together shoveling? Do they have a board meeting?
Only if they're talking to each other, okay? No, that's a good point. It's like I kid people. You can sit next to each other in church. You can dig that ditch out together, as long as you don't go to the meeting and vote to put new pipe in that ditch and never talk about it at the meeting. I move, I second, I vote. Bang, we just spent 10 grand. Now you send a message to your public that what did you do when you were digging that ditch? You made decisions. You talked about it, made decisions. Somebody started to raise their hand up. Sir?
You also have to watch real close about ethics and conflict of interest. If you're the one making the decision, and then you're the one doing it.
And getting paid for it. Yep.
And getting paid for it and all that. So you're not sure about that.
Good point. Sir, in the very, very back.
Same thing, just what he just said, conflict of interest.
Be careful of that. In the state of Oregon, when do you have a conflict of interest? When you or a family member are going to receive some benefit or lose a benefit, really, you've got a conflict. That's it. So, okay, somebody kept poking up their hand here. We're right there.
Yeah, so essentially the same question, except you're not getting compensated. This scenario, your volunteers, your directors, you're also the workers. You're not getting compensated.
Yeah.
You're just
Here-
contributing, your skill and labor.
Here's the conflict you could run into, though, and I ran into this with an irrigation district. That scenario you just gave, they're volunteers, they're on the board, they're not getting paid, they weren't even getting reimbursed for the fuel they're using in their rigs. But who was benefiting from the work they were doing? They were, not everybody. Does that make sense to you? The first ditch they repaired was a ditch that went to whose property? Okay? The slickest irrigation ditch in the district was the board chairs. And that's truth. Sorry if you're in here. I didn't rat you out. I just said it was a drainage district. Jan.
I think transparency in this one is, you mentioned the road district where you got 3 board members and they on the board, they are the workers that.
God bless them too.
It's obvious that when they're on the job, there are things going to be discussed. I think when they need to come to the board meeting, they need to be very careful that this is all made public. And if you keep the public transparent to what you're doing, you're going to avoid 99% of your problems.
Absolutely. Other comments on that? Questions? Trying to pick on my fellow beaver here, but he immediately put his hand down. All right, hey, good. Anything else from you guys? We doing okay up here? All right, we're going on to the final one. Scenario 7, recruiting board members. Oh, I heard moaning out here. Is that, that's one of the questions we're going to have. How do we recruit and maintain quality volunteers to serve on our board of directors? How do we define quality, qualified, desirable? Okay? Where do we find these people? Do we have a responsibility to do it? Okay? What about internal versus external politics? Is that a concern? Who's taking the lead? David is. The most unpolitical guy up here is taking the lead.
You want me to turn political and say go Beavs? Yeah, there we go, okay. Okay, I guess the first thing I'd open this up with was, how did you get on the board? Did somebody recruit you? How did they do it? I mean, if you're looking for, how to get people on the board.
I had an agenda.
There's an honest man right there.
So that would do it. One thing I point out, or I would look at, I guess, and have done, I guess, is get involved in, in the community. Have a community presence. Whether it means that you go to sporting events. I mean, I like sporting events and in nature, but you're talking to other neighbors and everything like that. Discuss what you're doing. See if they have an interest in anything like that. The other thing is your district having an open house, or if there is a community, the annual summer fair, whatever it is, have a presence there to explain people to what you do and what you run into. Those are ways that you find people that might have an interest. And then, as we've done have done in our district, you get them on the budget committee, because there'll be an opening on the budget committee, which really gives them more exposure to the whole budget, what's really being spent, and where their money's going. They take a look. They look at their property tax a little closer when they see that amount. So, but then you also, as you're looking at these people and recruiting, I don't know if it's recruiting, but it's just looking in the general populace. I mean, it'd be great if every position on the board was contested, that you had 2 or 3 people running for each position, which usually is not the case. But you try and avoid the one issue candidate, sorry. But it's that one issue, because then you want somebody that's got a breadth of the whole community. That's where, in our board, I really appreciate the fact that at one point I was a former volunteer, and we were very heavy in volunteers in Scappoose at the time, still are. And then we had one who was a retired firefighter from another district, not within our district. We had a lawyer at one time. So, I mean, we got a breadth of it. We had a local business person, which I think is very important, because they are out in the community every day, and they hear all sorts of things, and they're very good at explaining to people while they're out there. So I guess that's the way I would go. You try and get that cross-section of people. So I don't know that I covered all of it, George, but...
Oh, you're doing good. Any other panelists want to comment? Roy?
I'm going to turn my head around again, be your fire chief for a little while. What I would really encourage that you do as directors is keep your manager out of that loop. It places them in a real tough position to advocate for their boss. Down the road, when things get tough, and he may look to that person who helped him get on the board, and I just would encourage you to keep your manager out of that loop. I might be part of that discussion. Let's say that myself and I grab my board chairman, and he wants to go talk to a guy. Maybe I have enough knowledge to share with that new prospective person with that board chairman, but just try to keep yourself out of that, keep your manager out of that loop, getting his boss in place.
You're talking about recruiting for membership?
Yes, sir.
I'm talking
about recruiting, and so
board members.
Board members. I'm talking
So
about.
why would the manager need to stay clear of that?
Well, because now that I've got you on the board and I recruited you, now I've placed myself possibly.
Conflict of interest.
Well, down the road, I just think you're better served. That you're getting the whole idea behind this was to get our opinion. Now, you're getting my opinion. This and George's may differ. As a fire chief, and I spent a number of years as a fire chief, I really didn't like getting in the middle of picking the directors. Educating them, I love doing that, but selecting them and going out there and taking Billy Bob to dinner and say, hey, I really need you to get on the board. I need your help. I just think that places That's my opinion. Yes, ma'am.
Did the board ever discuss this person that they were thinking about to come on? Did the board, did they discuss it with you? Manager or whatever?
I think there was conversation about, we heard that Fred might be interested in getting on the board. Hey, Chief, why don't you go out and give him take him to lunch and see if he's interested? Kind of, sort of.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave, and then I got some
I
questions.
think maybe, again, in small communities, if it's, I'm gonna use the fire department because they're out there all the time. I think the chief is the one who's out in the community, and he is going to run into a lot of people. And they may discuss and ask him questions about the board. I don't think the chief should be, if you will, recruiting, but I think not an obligation, but I think he has every right to come back to the board.
Don't do that.
Yeah, come back to the board and say, here's a person who's interested, that's it for the chief. He no longer
Right.
is doing anything, but, and for that matter, any firefighter or anything like that out in the board, out in the community, if they know somebody, we're more than happy to take names, if you will,
Right.
and come up with something.
Dave, did you have a point?
Yeah, I was recruited by the chief and the assistant chief, and I don't know if the board was aware of it. But the reason I was recruited is because I come from a very unique part of the community. I live on a floating home, and I'm part of the floating community in our district. And the reason that the chief and the assistant chief came to me is there was a need for our community to be represented, and that's why I was asked. Plus, I have knowledge about fire codes and stuff like that. But we've never had a representative before. We have a large dollar value and about 150 homes represented. And
So, but
I
real-
was lucky to be recruited.
But really what the chief did was find out if he was interested, then he gave that information to who? The
That
board.
I wasn't part of. No,
Yeah.
he just told me I had to go find some
Right.
votes if I wanted to get elected.
Well, I was gonna say, I think the key point there is you still had to get elected, Dave.
Yes.
Yeah.
Still had to get
Okay.
elected, and I pursued that, but I had no awareness of our board or anything until it was brought to me, and then it became very interesting. But it was the chief that pointed it out to me.
Okay, let's start with this gentleman, then we'll go to you, Clayton.
This is a little bit off the point, but I've seen the conscious practice of people running for reelection with the intent of resigning shortly thereafter so that the remaining board could appoint the next board member. What do you think about that activity?
Well, I think that's internal politics. That's what I think it is. And I think it's eventually your community will pick up on that. Clayton?
But to the same point, the community's perception is that there may be a quid pro quo going on. If you help me get on the board, then I can help you. But in reality, the perception is Chicago politics.
Yeah, yeah. You need to be careful with it. I think that's what you heard these guys say, is there's things you need to be careful with. I do think that you have the right to appoint the citizen members of your budget committee. That's where you recruit future board members. One thing we did, this is kind of years ago, but we basically allowed each board member, when we were first getting going with the budget committee, back when we formed the district, to recruit a budget committee member, because we needed 5. So everybody went and got somebody they knew. And we tried to balance that, but then over the years that's changed because they come and go. But that's where I see with a lot of districts where their future board members come from. If they have a resignation or a death or something that forces them to have to appoint. Otherwise, I think it's better that the board members and the staff stay out of it and let the voters decide. That's just my personal opinion. Other question or comments? Sir, Mike.
Let's take it to the next position, which is really political, and that's the decision of how you decide who the next board chair is.
Oh, good point.
And how you go about that and still meet the open meetings laws.
Okay, that's a good point. Every year you should have an annual organizational meeting on your board, and you elect or appoint through a process your leadership for your board. And that's all it is, leadership for your board. Generally, they have no more powers than you do as a board member other than they run the meeting, okay? But now you're the board members, and July's coming, or January, or whatever your month is, and now you want to figure out, do you do it? Some boards rotate their leadership, just on a regular basis. Every year, you just know you get it for a year, or you get it for 2 years, and if you're not voted out, then you're voted out by the board in leadership 2 years after you serve it, okay? I worked for a district, and I'm not saying this is a perfect model, but I was fortunate enough that I worked for a district, and I had the same board president all 8 years I worked there. I mean, they liked that leadership style, and they just did it. It's really what you want to do. But the point that he was making is, when do you have the discussion about who's going to be the leadership of your board? At the meeting, at the organizational meeting, okay? And I've seen this happen. I've seen it happen on my own boards, where somebody comes in, I make a motion that Dave Sorensen be our president, and somebody seconds it, no more nominations. Okay, that may be because we all look at it and go, well, it's his turn. You know, and I don't want it. So if I don't talk about it, you know, I don't want to do it. So it just depends. And I guess if that helps you, Mike, you got to be careful with it. You know, I think it's bigger than that. I think if the person that are leading your board thinks they have more power than the other board member, then they need to look at the policies, because they really don't. Unless you have a policy that does what? Gives them that, okay? Unless it gives them that, because really your board chairs, your board presidents are only there to run your meetings. The board has to give them other powers. Owen.
Yes, we made a conscious decision, the board, that we would rotate every 2 years based on the position. So, and sometimes we nominate and vote the current board chairman for another 2 years.
Sure.
But we did make that decision.
It's a
good.
board policy.
It's a board policy.
Right.
And it's worked very well.
Works for you.
Another issue I'm concerned about, in the last 5 to 10 years in our area, and I'm on 3 different boards, so it's not just the special district board, it is harder and harder to find qualified people that are willing to spend the time. And
Right.
I think this is a more important issue, and I don't know what's causing it.
Well, we could do an hour presentation on just that. How do we help Charlie in his small district and some of those districts recruit people? Or, you know, you may not, it may be a numbers game, because it is a numbers game. There's only so many people in your community that are going to step up and play. I'll take one more, and we got to get you out of here.
I was just gonna say, as long as you still have a forum, don't get in a big giant hurry to run out and grab somebody.
Right.
You know, it might be to your detriment, so, what we did was we just put it, we put it out on paper and said, you know, there's a decision available.
Right.
Blah, 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 we would accept that.
Okay, somebody sent this to me. I had to share it. It isn't as funny now as it was, you know. But you are looking now. I'm going to tell you how I feel about this. I am now a Philadelphia Eagles fan, okay? I can finally cheer for Chip. All right. All right. We really want your input. I see some of you filling out your evaluations, so I appreciate that. We're trying to change the way we train, you know, make it more interesting for you. We're not trying to give you the basics. You've been on boards. Hopefully this was a little bit entertaining, a little bit knowledgeable for you, but give us your feedback.